Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet's FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name is Suj.
And my name is James.
And today, being Tuesday, is People's Poll Day. James, each and every Sunday, you put out a tweet letting people choose what we're going to talk about. Some weeks are different, some weeks are others. This week was about putting together a listicle of clubs or players or what have you. People had the choice. And you know what happens in lockdown, and has happened quite a few times whilst we're in lockdown. People pick weird things.
Yeah, this is no one's fault other than my own. So
True.
Yeah, I had this brainwave idea based on the Jamie Carragher idea that was floating about of pick a best ever world team in your lifetime. Of no two players could have played for the same club. No two players from the same nationality. And even that was brutal. And I was like, what can I do to make this Premier League focused? Mm-hmm. And I came up with something which we'll detail the rules in a sec, which was, yeah, mate, I've lost 2 days. I'm not going to lie. Because I did a team and I was like, man, there's some shit players in there. I'm not happy with this. And as soon as you move one component, you're moving a lot of components in this. Mm. So it wasn't just a case of, I'll take him out, put him in, and then, because obviously one thing would affect another for a number of reasons. So that Carragher challenge was an option in the poll. So too was an idea from our friend Adam at 3-5, who he'd sent in a question for last week's podcast. Correct. About picking a 20-team European Super League, as in who would be in it, heaven forbid if it ever happened. And the other one, which I think people were quite interested in, which I put in, was if England won the 2034 World Cup, and I think that's a possibility, not the trophy, by the way, but to actually have it here, which 16 stadiums would we put forward?
Did you just say 2034?
Yes.
That's quite a way away.
So obviously Qatar's got 22. USA predominantly, along with Canada and Mexico, are going to do 26 with this enhanced tournament of 48 teams over 16 venues. 2030, I suspect, is going to end up in Uruguay. It's the 100th anniversary of the first one.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think there's every chance that will happen. That happened with like the Olympics and stuff as well, didn't it? And then by
if not Uruguay, then maybe like South America with Uruguay hosting the majority.
Possibly, yeah, like help from others and all that. By which case, if that was to be the case, in 2034, it's got to come back to Europe. And by which point we wouldn't have hosted it for 68 years. And there's plenty of other European nations who have had it twice. I think we'd absolutely be due.
Yeah. I mean, home of football, right, at the end of the day. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see 2034. Well, we can just say St. James's Park would have a massive stadium there, possibly.
St. James's Park, yeah, it will host the semi-finals with a capacity of 115,000.
Roughly, give or take.
if you've been to Newcastle, you'll know they can't go much higher or wider than what they've got.
So they can level it and start again.
I think they'll find a way, but the one side that's not extended as much as the others, there's not really anywhere they can go that side without kicking people out their homes and stuff. It'll get complicated.
So none of those options won. The option that did win was you took Carragher, like you said, you took Carragher's challenge about picking a team. I love Jamie Carragher's team because it ended up with Neville Southall in goal. It was of all the players to end up as your goalkeeper. Cool. Okay.
It was a great goalie, to be fair.
Yeah. So tell everybody the rules about this challenge that you put together.
Right. So this is trademarked, just in case it goes global, which I don't expect it to. Premier League squad challenge. The rules are to select a squad of 25 players. There must be cover in every position. So, for example, 2 left backs, and there must be 3 goalkeepers. The reason for 25 players, obviously, Premier League clubs are currently forced to name a squad of 25 players.
Correct. Yep.
Players can only have played for one club in the Premier League. So, for example, Virgil van Dijk has played for Liverpool and Southampton in the Premier League. He would be ineligible. David Beckham has played in the Championship for Preston. So, obviously, his only Premier League club is Manchester United. Preston's a bad example because they haven't been in the Premier League. But I think you know what I mean. No two players can be picked from the same Premier League club. No two players can be picked from the same country. A player must be picked from all of the current 20 Premier League clubs. Doesn't currently have to be at that club. And you can also select from 5 previous Premier League clubs, dating all the way back to your Swindons and Oldhams and all that, if you want, to your more recent ones. Each player must have a squad number between 1 and 25, and they must be assigned a number that they wore for their club as a player. So, for example, if you wanted, I don't know, Luis Suarez at Liverpool, he's only worn number 7. So he would have to be the number 7. Therefore, you couldn't pick Cristiano Ronaldo. You could pick David Beckham because David Beckham has worn 7 and 24. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does indeed.
You could have Suarez and Beckham, but you couldn't have Ronaldo and Beckham because obviously that would be Manchester United. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, cool. That's the rules.
Complicated. I think the biggest challenge is obviously around one club. One club. There is a cheat way of doing this, but it'd take a little bit of time, probably less time than it's taken you, mind.
What's the cheat
way? I don't know if it's physically possible to get every club's squad, 25-man squad, downloaded into an Excel spreadsheet, because you could quite comfortably do that, and then you'd have an Excel spreadsheet, say 25 players per team, right? 20 teams. So you're talking the best part of, 500 players? How many seasons of the Premier League have we had now coming up to 26?
It goes...
Remove all the duplicates.
The Premier League obviously goes back to 1992. What you have to remember is the first season didn't have squad numbers. So I've seen a few where people have tried to be a little bit cheeky, knocking about, where like Ryan Giggs wore number 4 once, for example, in 92, 93 or something. Like, I'm not having that.
Nah, that's bending the rules a little bit.
It's got to be a squad number. Or as someone asked me, and I said, if that's the only number they wore during that season, for example, Teddy Sheringham at Spurs would have only worn 10, although he also played for Nottingham Forest, then yes, I would have accepted Sheringham, Tottenham 10, for example. But otherwise, no, none of this. Because obviously in those days, if you were a sub, it was 12 and 14, right? So how many 12 and 14s are there? Although I found number 12 and number 14 to be quite problematic numbers doing this.
So overall, I haven't done the challenge. I have no intention of doing the challenge. But my strategy would have been, had I decided to do the challenge, to think about players from obscure countries that had come to the Premier League, because you need 25 different nationalities here. It's not too difficult. The Premier League is a very international league, so you're going to have players from all around. But there are certain players that have come from countries where we don't have a massive volume of players in the Premier League. Case in point would be our friend Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Gabon. Right?
Yeah. Of course.
There's no one. I don't know anybody else from Gabon who's played in the Premier League. I'm sure there might be somebody. He's also a very, very good player, and so he could be like an easy shoe-in to get into the team straight away, depending on the squad numbers.
You can. Yes, but do you want to waste that Arsenal spot on Aubameyang when there's somebody else clearly who perhaps even at the same number should perhaps take that place?
Then you're ruling out your possibility of a different French player.
Yes, that's true. And some of the French players left out of this, by the way, is ridiculous.
I don't see any Drogba.
You're giving the game away now, aren't you?
Well, I've seen your squad. So I suppose when I look at the nationalities, there are some nationalities that have produced players that are out of this world. Yet, because of the compromises you've had to make, you haven't been able to include them.
The problem I found, I think that the way you're suggesting there is an absolutely fine way of doing it. There is a problem, and there are some problem clubs that you have to include. There's also a problem position. The problem position is left back. It's monstrous. Go and find good left backs who've only played for one Premier League club. That in itself is a challenge. I've picked what I believe is probably the best left back to play for only one club in the Premier League, and there had to be sacrifices to put that player in because I didn't want to waste that nation on that player. But I wanted the best possible team I could put together. So I wasn't prepared to put in a ringer of a left back. What I found, though, and the way I attacked it straight away, the first thing I did once I knew it was winning the vote, which was about 10 minutes into the vote.
I saw that as well. Come on.
I went and attacked Sheffield United. And the reason I went and attacked Sheffield United was because I knew, for example, it was going to be a largely bloated contingent of British players. And I was probably going to have to use a British player from Sheffield United. I was hoping that I could use Sander Berge if it fell back. But Sander Berge is number 32. And you can only pick players between 1 and 25. There are other clubs that cause problems, which we'll talk about while we're doing this. Burnley, obviously, yeah. Crystal Palace.
Yep.
Watford's another one that caused me a number of problems. And what I wanted to do in doing this was I didn't want to throw any ringers in from the 20 Premier League current clubs. I wanted every supporter of the current 20 Premier League clubs to go afterwards. My pick is okay. And I wanted to put together a first 11, which I'd say that can go and win me the Premier League. So I amended it so many times.
Based on the squad you've put together, it would, I wouldn't say it'd piss the Premier League, but it definitely could and should win the Premier League. There is more than enough talent in that 25-man squad that I'm looking at in front of me to win the Premier League.
I think the first 11 that I've got together from this could win it.
I'm in agreement with you. When I look top to bottom, I'm like, oof, like the attacking talent, incredible, and the defensive talent. There's some very, very good, solid players here. Some are a little old. Some of the young listeners may not remember them in real terms when they were actually playing, but they definitely were. So let's go through the squad 1 to 25, and then let's come back and put together you can tell everybody your first 11. So up front, number 1, the Aussie goalkeeper, Matt Ryan. That ticks off Brighton from your list. Yeah,
which is also potentially a problematic one because the only other real player that I really considered from Brighton to go with was Pascal Gross, who's number 13. Right. And obviously would fill the German hole but there's not great choices from Germany, actually. No. There were a number of other players.
Ballack could have been a decent shout.
Yeah, but then do you want to waste the Chelsea one on Michael Ballack? Which, I mean, Chelsea is one of the hardest ones to pick anyway, if not the hardest, I'd say. In terms of like who do you leave out is brutal because all of their good players as well seem to have played for different countries.
Yep.
So there were plenty of other players I considered at Brighton, like for example Gaetan Bong was one who could have filled the left back hole, Cameroonian left back at number 3. Davy Proper, who's Dutch, was another one I would have considered because believe it or not, I've managed to do this and there isn't a single Dutch player in this squad. I have no idea how it's got to that point. But yeah, gone with Matt Ryan, number 1, Brighton, Australia, fills a quota. He would be probably the number 1 goalkeeper in the team. He's still only 28. He's racked up 100 Premier League appearances or so in his 2 years at Brighton. I think he'll improve. I think he's had a dramatic improvement this season under Potter. He's a far better goalkeeper with his feet than I thought he was. I think he'll get better. He's a good goalkeeper.
Number 2, from Newcastle, Fabrizio Coloccini.
Yeah, difficult one this. Obviously, Coloccini goes in as the Argentinian. Obviously, a lot of people would... The problem with going Coloccini is it's straight away rules out so many right backs because the right back number and Coloccini goes in as a centre-half. Played a huge number of games for Newcastle, about 250, I think, was obviously a full international. There's only one member of this 25, by the way, who wasn't a full international. He stayed with the club when they got relegated. I think Newcastle fans would be okay with that choice. To fit in others for Newcastle...
It was club captain as well, right? If I remember from Tom,
for a long period.
Tom Campbell's quiz.
Great hair. Gutierrez was another one I considered. But other than that, I think I would have had to take restrictions with Newcastle, looking at people like perhaps Paul Dummett, who's been there quite a while as a left-back option. And I just felt Newcastle had been in the Premier League for long enough that I didn't want to make too many sacrifices with them. And I think Coloccini was just about the best pick I could have got from them.
Yeah, decent shout. From number 3, solves your left-back problem. You've taken Ben Chilwell from Leicester, and that's your England spot gone.
Yeah, that's the horrible thing. There's two horrible things with that. One, I didn't really want to use the English player on Ben Chilwell. You would
No.
have ideally wanted to use it on Steven Gerrard or Harry Kane or something like that. And also, he's not part of the Leicester title winning team. So you think of some of that team, obviously you'd want to go like someone like Vardy, and I explained why I couldn't really get to Vardy, for example, as an alternative, also English and Leicester. So I looked at possible swaps there, but it just would have given me a shit left back no matter what I did. Every other possible left back would have been crap. I mean that, honestly. There are so many out there, but they're all rubbish. Everyone's you think, oh, he'll do, like Ian Hart, for example, goes and plays 10 games for Reading or something in the Premier League. Ender Stevens, I didn't realise he even played for Aston Villa, would have filled a Sheffield United problem, and I could have used him as an Irishman as well. There were so many. Patrice Evra, I would have actually considered, for example, Manchester United. He played for you.
Yeah.
He went and played a handful of games for you, so couldn't use. And I probably would have gone Patrice Evra and not gone who I've gone with for United, just to give the team a little bit of a better balance. So I went with what I believed was the best left back I could possibly find, and I've gone with Ben Chilwell.
It'll do. Number 4, Luka Milivojevic is a reasonable shout from Crystal Palace.
Yeah, Palace
Ticks those boxes.
And Serbia. There was a couple of problems with this one. One is the players that I've left out that could have won number 4 are horrendous. Horrendous. There were a couple of players, even this squad, I could have adapted and put number 4 and opened up other avenues, for example. Palace is a really awkward one because the players you think of who have done quite well there, so like your Zahars, your Balassis, Gary Cahills, you can't put them in. I would have used the Spanish quote on Gaeta, number 31, for example. Can't use it. So the only players I ended up really looking at for Palace as alternatives was Tony Popovic, who was an Australian centre-half, part of the 04-05 relegated side. But he played about a good 150 games for Palace or so. I would have been okay with that. Lombardo, who didn't pull up trees at Palace, but there's not a huge amount of Italians to choose from. The problem with Lombardo was the number 7. Yeah, right. I want to be using that in other places, right? So I think anything else that I would have picked for Palace would have been a real downgrade in terms of quality. And I felt Milivojevic, solid eyes, he'll do the job for me. So that's who I've gone with. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Number 5, Blast from the Past. And I think this is a very, very good shout because it fills your quota for a club that used to be in the Premier League, Leeds United, and you've brought back the South African captain, Lucas Radebe.
Yeah, very good player. Obviously played there for a number of years.
Beast. Solid guy.
Really, really good centre-half. Incredibly popular. Obviously, the Kaiser Chiefs formed their band name on the back of his performances for Leeds because that was the South African club that he came from, the Kaiser Chiefs.
Yep.
There were others to consider from Leeds. Gary Kelly was one, Irish fullback, who I considered quite strongly. He could have filled number 2 or 22. But what I wanted was 3 pretty solid centre-halves. And in Colaccini, Radebe and one other, I think I've got it. So to give the favouritism to the current Premier League club, I would play Colaccini and probably have Radebe as my first backup. And I think that's bang solid, mate, for a centre-half understudy in a squad like this.
Yep. Moving on to number 6, Klaus Lundekvam hits your Norwegian tick in the box. As I say, hits your Norwegian criteria or quota of one person.
Southampton, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Now, Southampton's like 90% of their players are ineligible because they then go to play for Liverpool. So it rules anyone that they've got good or automatically ends up playing for 2 clubs, unfortunately. But Lundekvam's not a bad player. He's decent.
No, he played like about 350 times for Southampton, so 40 odd times for Norway as well. So it's not a Mickey Mouse pick by any stretch. He was obviously more 90s and early noughties, as perhaps our older listeners would remember a bit better. Southampton alternatives I considered was like Jason Dodd at right back because he played a number of times for them as well, but that would have used the English quota. I was at one stage trying to work Matt Letizia in, but problem would have been number 7 as well. The other one I strongly considered and nearly ended up with from Southampton was the Latvian Marian Pahars.
Yeah.
Anders Svensson I was considering at one stage, Swedish wide player. But I think Lundik Varm, solid as. I think Southampton fans will be okay with that pick.
What nationality is Tadic?
Serbian.
Did
So
he,
Tadic was on the short list, but obviously gone with Milivojevic.
Yeah, I think I'd say Milivojevic and Lundik Varm I'd rather have than Tadic, and then having to take somebody else from Palace for sure. You've spoken about this coveted number 7 spot for a while. We're at number 7, and you have gone with the possibly greatest number 7 to have played in the Premier League, Cristiano Ronaldo, Manchester United and Portugal legend.
This was it wasn't straightforward because, for example, there's other number 7s. I've already mentioned 2, Lombardo, Letizier, players like that would have fitted in really nicely to make the overall squad look better.
Yeah.
And obviously the main one, Luis Suarez at Liverpool. I mean, if I'd have gone Suarez and then moved to a different United player, I think it'd have been perfectly acceptable. I think, say, if Patrice Evra had not played for you, I might have ended up going that route, but then that would have meant no Ronaldo, and somebody else very important as well would have taken the French spot, of course. There were other United players, obviously, that could have been considered. I actually considered David De Gea. Gary Neville, I didn't really want to waste a spot there. Paul Scholes, I had a draft at one point where I'd actually gone with Paul Scholes as the English player. Ruud van Nistelrooy. So it wasn't straightforward just to go definitely Ronaldo, but I just felt, how could I leave him out?
When I look at the list and I go and my eyes scan from top to bottom, as soon as you see his name there, you're just like, yeah, it's a nod. It's a nod. You can't argue with Cristiano Ronaldo being put in there. But number 8, I'm not in disagreement with. I just was curious about using your Brazilian spot.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Number 8. Tell everybody who you've got from Brazil.
Well, it's Felipe Anderson, which obviously he doesn't make the first 11 here, but not a bad attacking mid to have sitting on the bench of this squad, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
You're quite right in terms of the Brazilian. Like, did I want to be using the Brazilian quote on Felipe Anderson? No. The Brazilian I really wanted was Juninho.
Okay.
And I just could not make it happen at all. Just couldn't make it happen. He was the main one, Brazil-wise. There wasn't too many others that I was looking at. Obviously, you could have looked at like Ederson and Alisson.
Yeah, I was going to suggest.
I didn't really want to take the quotas from those two.
Yeah, one of my early thoughts was the goalkeeper position, Alisson or Ederson, one club players, and very, very, very good goalkeepers. So would tick in the box straight away.
Do you want to be using the City or Liverpool players on the goalkeeper? That's the problem.
True.
Just while you're covering that quickly, for a long time I had Courtois in this squad. But again, I just thought, do you know what? If you're going to have a weak one here, like the likes of Matt Ryan and my second choice goalkeeper are solid enough. They'll do the job. They ain't going to be having to save too much in this team anyway, mate. The front players are going to have so much of the ball. Yes, I didn't want to use it on Felipe Anderson, but did by default. West Ham actually was a bigger problem than I thought it was.
Yeah, we buy everybody else's rejects, so they've all played for another Premier League club before they get to us.
And you're a feeder club, mate. So all your players have gone and played for someone else in the Premier League. It was really difficult trying to find...
What you need to do is find somebody that we bought from overseas that ended up being a massive flop and then went back overseas.
Or someone that did really well and then buggered off, like Dimitri Payet, number 27. And also, yes, would have taken the French spot. But yeah, there wasn't many other cases of that. Like Di Canio played for Sheffield Wednesday. Everybody you wanted to think of, even an alternative like the late Mark Vivian Foe, obviously played for Manchester City beforehand, would have been a good quota from, say, Cameroon. Everybody decent at West Ham has played for someone else. If you put together a best West Ham 11 of the Premier League, none of them's a one club, man. Unless you want to fight in... Well, even Julian Dix. Julian Dix went to Liverpool, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I suppose if you were going to create a best West Ham 11, you'd probably put Mark Noble in there just for longevity, and he's a one-club man. But that's it, really. But you don't want to waste your England spot on Mark Noble.
Well, I wouldn't have had too much of a problem with that. But once I decided Chilwell was going to be the left back, obviously ruled him out. The other English one I would have considered from West Ham is Alvin Martin, who only would have played in the last few years at West Ham, but I could have used as a number 5. The other ones that came into contention for West Ham
over
was...
here, Alvin Martin.
Is he? There you go. See?
There you go. Can you see that?
No one can see that. Oh, yeah, just about see it.
A bald Alvin Martin.
It was kind of coming through funny with your graphics there, mate.
My background, yeah, cool.
Yarmolenko was one who was under consideration, again, just kind of by default as a Ukrainian. There actually is not that many options from West Ham, surprisingly. No. So I've ended up with Anderson.
Let's rattle through a few more of these, James. There's a few that are obvious and I've got no issue with at all. Your number 9, Raul Jimenez, Wolves of Mexico. Good shout.
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be someone, I think, from the last couple of years with Wolves rather than looking back further just because the quality of that team. I think most people will end up with Jimenez here by default because it just works nicely.
Yeah, I mean, half the squad's
arguably Wolves' best player. Covers Mexican as well. You'd probably say best Mexican Premier League player, I would say. And you're quite right. Everybody else,
maybe he played at Manchester United.
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, Chicharito is a good argument. There's another.
But there's not much between them. I think by the time Jimenez's career's done, I think there's not going to be much between him and Chicharito in the Premier League for sure.
Yeah,
probably trophy-wise.
Everything else was basically Portuguese or
English,
a couple of Spanish. So Johnny Spanish was one I really considered
Traore
as a left back. Option. Can't have Traore because he's number 37 and also played for Middlesbrough and Aston Villa in the Premier League. I actually, for a long period though, didn't have Jimenez. I had Rui Patricio for a long period, and number 11. But it opened up the quality of my goalkeepers so much better if I took down that route. The problem was then obviously no Ronaldo. So I've gone with the safer one, Jimenez. Jimenez wouldn't make the first 11 of this team. What a great forward to have as first backup.
Number 10, Eden Hazard. I mean, Belgium, the wealth of talent from Belgium is ridiculous. The ones that might leap off the page would have played for more than one club. And the one that many may go to by default would have been Kevin De Bruyne, potentially.
Can't have Kevin De Bruyne. Played for Chelsea. But the one that was hard to leave out was Kompany. When we come onto the City selection, I'll talk about them a bit more. Leaving Kompany out was awful. I felt he should have been in this. With Chelsea, there were so many players you could pick from. So as I said, at one point I was ending up with Courtois. Now, obviously, he was Belgian as well. The one that really hurt me to leave out was Makelele. I really wanted Makelele in this team, but French as a problem, as we'll come on to.
Yeah.
You got Zola, Italian, Drogba. There were so many options. You'd mentioned Michael Ballack. Michael Essien, I considered at one stage, would have filled up number 5 quite nicely, possibly. So many players you could pick from Chelsea. It was really hard to pick one. So in the end, I went for what I believe is the best Chelsea player I've seen, which is Eden Hazard.
Tell me about number 11 and why he's allowed in your squad.
Why is he allowed in? Because he's bloody good enough. And that's also why I ended up on this one as well, because he's the best player that I've seen play for Spurs, and it's Gareth Bale. What's important just to mention, obviously, on Hazard and Bale briefly, obviously you could use Hazard for 17 rather than 10, which you think might have opened up Juninho, but trust me, would have given me further problems down the right line. And obviously Bale, you could put in as number 3, and you could put him in as number 16 as well, which people forget. But actually, it worked best for me to play him with number 11, which he only wore for the last year at Spurs. Number 3 was his main number, actually. With Spurs, there were only a handful of players I considered for this. Lloris was one, because as a goalkeeper, his first number was 25, so it could have worked quite nicely. Kane, obviously, I considered. Jurgen Klinsmann, not too many Germans about, I would have considered. But I felt the Spurs player had to be in the first 11 of this team. And actually, if I'd put Klinsmann in, I'm not sure he would have made the starting lineup. No. And I couldn't be having that. So, gone with Bale. The one I really wanted as the alternative is another midfield player, because I really wanted someone creatively in midfield and also someone who could tackle in midfield to get the proper balance. So like Makaleli and Modric, I mean, wow, would have been incredible. So I really wanted Modric. The full team was the problem. I just couldn't get him in.
Number 12, you've gone with a solid centre-back in Sami Hyypiä.
Yeah, I think it was a top centre-half, and I really wanted one centre-half at least from the so-called Big Six, or former Big Four, if you will.
Yeah. And
I felt he fitted better than anybody else. The problem with Kompany, for example, is little things why I ended up not with Kompany was I can't have Kompany and Hazard. And Milivojevic, if I went Kompany over Milivojevic, Palace became such a headache. So I ended up with Sami Hyypiä, which obviously meant no Suarez, no Gerrard. Remember, you can't have Salah or Mane.
Yeah.
I did consider Roberto Firmino as a brilliant Brazilian spot, but I just felt that wasn't same thing. Like if I was comparing him with Klinsmann, was he even going to be in my best team?
No.
Whereas Sami Hyypiä definitely was. You could use him as 4 or 12, but because of the Milivojevic problem, I've used him as number 12. I think he played 350, 400 odd times for Liverpool. A really, really good centre-half. He got a proper send-off when he went. He went out on his terms. Brilliant play, obviously Finnish international.
Let's rattle through some of these, James. We've got so many to look at. We're not even halfway through it, mate. Magnus Headsman was your next pick.
Yeah, really good goalkeeper for Sweden, was part of their 2002 World Cup and played out 4 or 5 seasons while Coventry were in the Premier League. He was quite a coup for them because he was a very good goalkeeper. And actually, it would be toss a coin whether you started with Ryan or Headman. That would be the hardest choice in the starting first 11. So Headman as number 13 covers really nicely there. And there's obviously another one from the 5 clubs not currently in the Premier League.
And 14, you've gone with Thierry Henry. I personally wouldn't have, but I suppose maybe I've got this fixated in my head that Aubameyang's from Gabon now, so maybe not. But I mean, Thierry Henry, the thing with Arsenal and France is that there's a massive wealth of talent. You can't go wrong. Like whether you pick Makaleli over Henry or whether you ended up with a Dutchman and had Bergkamp instead of Henry, that's all good. Like none of those are difficult, or none of those are wrong decisions, let's say.
I think the reason I had to go with Henry is when you list all of these players, Henry is unquestionably the best footballer to ever play for Arsenal. I don't think many Arsenal fans would disagree with that opinion. Of all the players in this squad as well, and all the available players that I could have possibly picked, in terms of Premier League impact, if you take away Ronaldo's Madrid period and all that, Henry did more in the Premier League than Ronaldo, and therefore I think Henry had to be in. So
you don't think
he was a must for me.
From a Premier League point of view for Arsenal, you're not thinking Jermaine Pennant?
Yeah, of course, mate. Also played for Liverpool, Birmingham with an ankle tag.
Jack Wilshere?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, he hasn't played for West Ham, has he?
No. Not in the Premier League.
There were obviously some difficult ones to leave out. The only 2 I really thought about as alternatives for Arsenal were Tony Adams. Just again, because I really wanted one centre-half from the big clubs, and Bergkamp. Those were the only ones I've really considered. Robert Perez had a brief spell at Aston Villa that I think a lot of people forget about. Van Persie obviously went to Man United. So it was only really Henry, Bergkamp and Adams were the only ones that I really considered. I just felt it had to be Henry. I wanted to use him as number 12. And this is where the playing with things comes difficult, because when he came back for the loan spell, he wore number 12, which obviously would have allowed me Modric. And then I could have moved Hyypiä to number 4. Now I've got a Crystal Palace problem again. So that's why Henry goes in as what should be his number anyway, number 14.
Chris Löw at number 15.
Yes, Chris Löw, backup left back for this squad anyway, was alternating. Huddersfield regularly changed their fullbacks. But they're 2 years in the Prem. He did all right. He's the only player of this squad who doesn't have a full international cap. He was part of the Borussia Dortmund squad that won the Bundesliga in 2012. He's not a complete ringer, but left back was a problem. He also filled the German quota, which I wasn't going to use anywhere else.
No.
And left back was such a problem. The other one I really ended up with for a long period, when it would have filled a Dutch quota, would have been number 16 for me, would have been Wilfried Boomer of Aston Villa. who had a good spell there at Villa, but I didn't feel that wasn't the Villa one that I wanted to use either. So by default, I've gone and looked outside the leagues to pick up my backup left back, and Lova does fine. Also, my backup right back can also cover at left back, so I don't think he's going to play much.
You got Ollie Norwood in at 16.
Yeah.
That you've solved your Sheffield United problem there.
Yeah, well, I felt it was the best way to go because Sheffield United had such a contingency of British players and obviously a couple of Irish players. It felt best to try and fill the quota with Scottish, Irish, Welsh in some way to leave myself the best. There was a Norwegian player called Flo who played for them in the early 90s when the Premier League started. Like, I can't remember him. Like, I've seen him in some other people's squads. I'm not having it. And I like Ollie Norwood as a footballer. The full Northern Ireland international. I think he offers good cover in central midfield. He is the brain that sits behind the energy of Fleck and Lundstrom, really. Fleck was someone I really considered for this as a Scotland person. But again, it would have been a number 4 problem. So Norwood is the one I've gone with. It could have been any of it. Ender Stevens obviously couldn't have been. I could have used the English quota on Border. I considered John Egan, who's Irish, for example. But I felt actually when I started looking at the Northern Ireland options, Norwood was okay.
Yeah, it's a decent shout.
The other one that would have been Northern Ireland, sorry, just to cut in, Suj, that I could have used as a backup was Chris Brunt of West Brom.
Okay.
Could have used him as a backup left back, but he'd only worn number 11, so then that meant no bail.
Number 17, I think, is quite easy, really. Johan Berg Gudmundsson. It's hard to get players from Burnley that are not British born. You're not going to have that many Icelandic players in the Premier League. Tick, tick. Number 17, job done. And a great player as well. Good player, not great player, good player.
Yeah, the problem here was I really wanted to use Gudmundsson for number 25, and I've had to cut the ties to use something else there to fill the squad up. Could have used Gudmundsson in 7 as well. You obviously weren't going to use him there. Using them at 17, the problem was it meant I had to move Hazard from 17 to 10, and that's the bit that then meant no Juninho. And I can't use 25 because I've had to use that on my third goalkeeper spot. I've had to, the way I've done this squad. So Gudmundsson, yeah, good player. The other one, foreign one, which I did consider for a little bit if I'd left that number 10 spot open, Ashley Barnes. Austrian.
I haven't looked all the way down. Do you have any other New Zealanders? You could have had Chris Wood, but I don't know if you want to use your number 9 spot.
Chris Wood was ineligible. He played for someone else. I think maybe Leicester in the Premier League, but he was ineligible. The only other New Zealand player I really considered was one of yours, actually, Suj, was Winston Reid.
Winston Reid.
But I didn't think he was a better pick than Colaccini.
No. I'd probably agree with you on that, yeah.
So
18?
Gudmundsson covered it well. 18 is the one I think it might upset Hornets fans a little bit. I've gone with Kamil Zuniga, who had a loan spell a couple of years back and actually scored a crucial goal coming on as a substitute against Manchester United. He played about 25 times at right back. He's more famously remembered for his time at Napoli, playing in a 3-5-2 system where actually would normally play as the left wing back. That's what I meant. He can cover on the left side rather than Lerber. He was a good player, mate. He played 4 of the 5 games for Colombia in the 2014 World Cup. It was actually his knee that broke Neymar in the quarter-final. He was a good player. Watford was an awkward one because the ones you wanted, you couldn't. So you can't have Delafeo, obviously. Pereira's number 37. Can't go near that. The Watford player I really wanted was Decore. He's French, so forget about it. And I started looking historically at people like Rob Page, even the goalkeeper Alec Chamberlain, who I think Watford supporters would have preferred. But once I'd ended up with Ben Chilwell, English, I'd really restricted what I was able to do in terms of selections. So I ended up with Zuniga as my backup right back. I think he's okay. He had better spells outside of Watford. Sorry, Watford fans. That's the one I feel bad about.
At the moment, you might feel bad about a couple of others in a minute. Stilian Petrov at Aston Villa.
Stilian Petrov at Aston Villa.
Loved by the villains, not just because of obviously what happened off the field after his career and with the illness and what have you, but there's not going to be any other. I mean, there were some Bulgarians that have played in the Premier League and done well, but single club players like Berbatov didn't play for. He played for 2 clubs. and so on. So I think as a single club man in the midfield, and look, he's going to be benched in his squad anyway.
First 11, mate.
Yeah. Did you have him straight in? Did you?
Yeah, first 11 for me. Very good player. The Villa fans will adore him. Obviously, it was leukemia he had, wasn't it, that he had to retire from?
Yeah.
Was very successful before going to Villa in Scotland with Celtic. Played obviously a huge number of games for Bulgaria. He's my protector in the midfield to protect the front five in front of him, mate. So I would put Petrov in ahead of, say, Milivojevic and that. I honestly, I'd put him in. I think he was a very underrated footballer, and I think actually Villa fans would be quite happy with that shout.
Stefano Iranio. It's your Italian spot gone.
Yeah, played 100 times for roughly 100 times. 95 league appearances for Derby County in the 90s. Another one, very good player, very underrated. Could play wide right midfield, central midfield. You could have also used him as cover at right back. I would accept that, actually, if somebody wanted to go down that route. Really, really good player. Derby had a decent side in the 90s, and he was probably the best player amongst that.
21, your Manchester City pick, James, and your Spain pick. To be honest, once you rule out who can and can't be picked and the countries and what's left, David Silva is as good as it gets, and you can't argue with him. If you had no restrictions and you were going to pick one or two players or top three players out of Manchester City from the Premier League for the last 10 years, it'd be one of them.
For me, Manchester City, there was only ever three players under consideration: Kompany, Silva, and Aguero. I think anything else with what they've done over the last 10 years would have been completely incorrect to be downgraded. I don't know, looking at people like Mendy and Kolarov or even Leroy Sané, I think it just would have been wrong against the other three. So it had to be one of those three, in my opinion. As we said, obviously De Bruyne had played for Chelsea, so he couldn't use him. So yeah, it fits nicely. I think he would be go and get the ball off Petrov and let the front four go and do their thing. He's wonderful, wonderful footballer. I think he's one of them. People will realise how good he was when he finishes this season and he goes and does other things. That Manchester City will really miss him. He so fits into that Guardiola style of the way they want to play. And at times this year, we've seen him play deeper in a central midfield position and not look out of place. He's been really good when he's played there, playing deeper, which is natural as he begins to get a bit older. Obviously, you could play him in a number of different positions.
Indeed.
Top player.
4 more to go, possibly. James, number 22. Explain yourself.
Oh, shit. No!
I only saw it a couple of minutes ago and I thought
I've just seen it as well.
2 Finns. You need to get back to the drawing board with Norwich. And it just goes to show how difficult this challenge is. You've got 22 and a number 12, James. 2 Finns in your squad.
No, that can't be right. Oh, no.
Have you got a backup 22, James?
No, not really.
Then you're going to need a backup Liverpool number 12. I reckon you're better off finding a backup number 12 from Liverpool.
Oh, no. That's a nightmare. I've ruined the whole fucking podcast.
That's what people want to see. It's fine. We're going to come back to you with a 12 and a 22 in a little while.
Shit, man. It was meant to be Team with Pookie. How have I ended up with 2 fucking Finns in there?
Exactly. There's only about 20 people in the whole country. Let's talk about 23, 24 and 25.
It doesn't affect the first 11 anyway, because Pookie obviously wouldn't have been in that first 11.
Nah. You got Seamus Coleman in there, Republic of Ireland and Everton. Good shout.
Yeah, I think so. The 2 real players, I did consider David Weir a little bit. Others had been elsewhere, so like Duncan Ferguson had a spell at Newcastle. The 2 players I really considered were Coleman. Obviously, Leighton Baines had a spell at Wigan, so you couldn't use him. And Tim Cahill.
Yep.
I think would have been a good shout. Yeah.
What number did he wear? Was it 8?
17.
Oh, okay.
Which would have given me a Burnley problem. I've obviously now got a big fucking Norwich problem. I'm going to record, when this is finished, I'm going to record my own audio and hang it on to the end with my fixed team because I can't believe that I've managed to do this. 24. Coleman, great. He'd be first choice right back. Very, very good player. I don't think we need to cover that any further. Obviously covers Republic of Ireland.
And you got the Scott, and you've got your Bournemouth coverage in Ryan Fraser. I don't think many Cherries fans will disagree with the wee man getting into this 25-man squad at all.
I looked at Callum Wilson, Josh King. I looked at, obviously, the experienced heads like Cook, Fraser. I even listed Aaron Ramsdale at one stage. I might come back to that because he's number 12.
Right.
I might have to go for a shit left back after all. I can't believe it. But yeah, Ryan Fraser with that high number of 24, I think covers Bournemouth, Scotland nicely. One of their better Premier League players, I think, is fine as a pick.
Definitely. And finally, your third goalkeeper, not bad goalkeeper, mind, that you've chosen in Jurgen Sommer. Not the greatest that's ever come to the Premier League, but, not the worst.
I think QPR fans might have varying opinions about him, actually. He played about 35 times for QPR in the mid-90s. He did win 10 caps for USA, which, considering it was around the time of Casey Keller, Brad Friedel, etc.
Yeah.
He's no mean feat, excuse me. So he goes in as a third-choice goalkeeper and obviously covers America and uses one of the quotas of the 5 teams outside the Premier League. Right, I'm fucking off to fix this squad now.
Tell everybody your starting 11, James.
The starting 11, I would probably just go Matt Ryan over Magnus Headsman. I think that's really close. I'll probably just go Matt Ryan. Go Coleman at right back, Chilwell at left back, Hippier and Colaccini just over Radaby. Mind you, I might be sacrificing Sammy Hippier in a minute.
Midfield can step in perfectly well.
Midfield would be Petrov holding with David Silva just in front. We'll go Bale on the left, Ronaldo on the right, and Hazard behind Henry. That front four, mate. Jeez,
Henry, Hazard, Bale, Ronaldo, David Silva, front 5. Oh, they would destroy some teams.
Game over, isn't it?
Absolutely destroy some teams. Yeah. It just would be absolute silky, quick, fast, amazing football. Not a doubt in the world. I suppose that little finish problem there shows how hard this challenge really is, right? Everybody's going to get to a certain point and they're going to have to tear it up and start again. I don't think you're at that point, and I think still, regardless of that, it's a credit to doing an incredible amount of research. The thing I find most interesting from it was players that have played for other clubs. You're like, did he play for them? Did he play for them? Did he play for them? I didn't know that Chris Woods played for Villa. Did you say Villa he played for?
I think he had a spell at Leicester.
Oh, Leicester, sorry.
Was his other. Might have even been West Brom, maybe. He played for a few clubs you forget about, mate.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like, oh, wow.
I found this really educating. There was things that I couldn't remember and didn't know. Like Ender Stevens, literally, I was jaw open. Like, we played for Villa, 4 years ago? I had no recollection of that.
Yeah.
And there was a few others as well. You go to check. Goalkeepers was murder as well. Every time you thought you'd clocked it, something would get in the way. So, suddenly I had a brainwave. I can use the Brazilian quote on Julio Cesar of QPR. He was Brazil number 1 for fucking ages. He wore number 33. There were so many problems with that. At 26, you've got John Terry, Ledley King, for example, you couldn't use. There were others with higher numbers as well. Yari Lippmann would have covered Finn with Liverpool. I think he was number 37, I think.
Oh. No, we've got enough Finns there.
Loads of goalkeepers on numbers 26 and upwards that you just couldn't use. And you think, I've got it. No, couldn't use them.
Ouch. Very difficult.
The one I did want to work in, and actually reassessing this, I might end up with, was to use the backup goalkeeper, was Brian Jensen, Danish and Burnley, who you could use as number 12. Because the problem is, if you go 1 and 13, this is why I looked at Patricio as well, then finding a decent keeper in the other numbers is obviously really
hard.
difficult. You are going to probably use 1 and 13. If you don't use 1 and 13, you obviously can use 1. If you don't use 13, it becomes really difficult to find 2 good goalkeepers between sort of 12 and 25. But I might go back to that actually.
Guys, what we're looking for from you is Screenshot your 25-man squads. Do whack them in the pin tweet or tweet with the podcast on Twitter, because it'd be interesting to have a look through who else you have found that has fit the criteria of one Premier League club. No two nationalities are the same, and so on and so on. Let's read all of the rules. Squad numbers 1 to 25 and what have you. It's a very, very difficult challenge. So if you have managed it, well done. What do we have left this week, James?
We have left. I've got to go and fix this squad. If you're watching on YouTube, sorry, I am going to record an additional audio by myself and pop it on the end of the podcast.
Nice. You can edit the video as well and pop it on the end of that.
No, how'd you do that?
So we've got a quiz at you tomorrow, which is Premier League hat trick. So if you want to swat up before then and you're listening before Wednesday, do that. Followed by a throwback Thursday. We're going to look back at the old Newcastle, the ones before the 300 million, billion, trillions that have come into the club, possibly maybe sometime in the near future. It'll be like looking back on the good old days, followed by a live stream with James on Friday. So do stay tuned, hit the bell and subscribe and like a notification and all that kind of stuff to get notified as soon as we push some content out. Other than that, be safe with all your families. Ciao for now.
Be nice to each other. Man child, don't hit the music. I'm off to fix this shit.